Magandang umaga sa inyo lahat. Okay? Great. Good morning. Good morning. Before I get started, please, everybody stand up. Put your hands in the air. And then put it behind your back and say, good job. I'm here learning about the future with FinTech. Good job. I'm here learning about the future with FinTech. Okay. Thanks. Sit down. I think I'm really excited about people stepping out of their comfort zone to understand the FinTech industry, and Ortiz was very good at setting that platform of what vision about what Union Bank is doing. So I am the Chief Experience Officer for GlobalCreditPros, and we are a boutique FinTech company specializing in focusing on outsourcing, financial literacy, and disrupting the cycle of debt. Today, the 4 key takeaways will be FinTech has mass adoption, technology is necessary but not sufficient. Our last speaker spoke about that several times. Customers, the people in the end who understand the customers will win this game, and then understanding why we exist. But before we get started, I have a short video that really encapsulates all of this. Let's see if technology works.
Since April 13, 2015, a proud member of Team Nicolene. IBEX has been very supportive hanggang sa dumating yung delubyo sa buhay ko about my father being sick, and nagkaroon kami ng 1.8 million bill sa hospital na kailangan namin isettle or else mawawalan kami ng bahay at lupa na tinira namin for almost 40 years. Answered prayer for me that IBEX came up with a partnership with GlobalCreditPros, who actually automatically helped me when my father needed 30,000 for a certain operation that needs to be done immediately. Hindi sila nagdalawang isip, bigyan ako ng pagkakataon, pinagkatiwalaan. So I really appreciate all the things that GlobalPros Credit had provided for me. And especially now, dahil nakahinga na ako sa father ko, I am now working on renovating my house. Unti-unti, sementado na siya from being amakan. And at the same time, yung tiwala ng GlobalCreditPros is something that I will never really put into a negative perspective. I'm working very hard for my child, and I know GlobalPros together with IBEX will help me fulfill her dreams to be somebody someday. Kaya thank you to both IBEX and GlobalPros.
Not an uncommon story among Filipinos. Would you agree? Yeah. So the message really is, with FinTech, it's not about the technology, but it's about creating experiences for your customers like this. These are the types of companies that'll win in the long run. So let's talk about the state of play. Mass adoption of FinTech is going on across the world. This slide depicts the amount of penetration that's occurring. The key takeaway here is other nations have already moved very rapidly. Southeast Asia is just now coming up to speed, but it's coming up to speed very rapidly and will exceed the rest of the world pretty soon. The adoption will be driven by our young folks. People like me, Ortiz, and Cesar. I like to keep my same cell phone. I don't like to change it. But young folks will like to change their cell phone over and over. So we can see that this age group is the age group that will embrace this type of technology. And that will accelerate the amount of adoption, not only here in the Philippines, but across the rest of Southeast Asia. Yesterday, we were at the ADB conference, many of us, and we talked mostly about payments. So if you think about the spectrum of the FinTech technology, there's 4 playing fields: money transfers, savings, financial planning, insurance, and borrowing. And you can see here that there's been an accelerated rate and money payments across the board because everybody knows remittances are a big player. What I learned yesterday is remittances, even within a country, is higher than remittances from outside of the country. And the same goes true for here in the Philippines. Next on board is insurance. Later on, my friend Nookie from FWD will talk about insurance and give you a lot more insights on how his company is changing the landscape around insurance. The other 2 categories, we have to come up to speed on those, especially in the Philippines, and we're working on that. What's the problem? Philippines has 7,107 islands at high tide, and so it's very dispersed. So what we're trying to say is, right now, few of the provinces have banks. We talked about sorry stores yesterday, and the ADB is also a line of credit. Only 2 out of 10 people really have deposit accounts, and most of those deposit accounts are actually in the NCR region. And finally, if you're going to lend, we all know, we've heard the 5-6 message, if you're going to lend, only 10% of people actually go through a legitimate organization. So that's the problem with the Philippines, especially because it's diverse. So FinTech is here to help solve those problems. We can't get confused that technology, though it is critical and essential, is not sufficient. I say that not because it's 2019, but I say that because it's a historical fact. Every time there is a technology shift, people sometimes get caught up in the technology and not the outcome, the way it impacts people's lives. So the first video I showed you is really essentially about impacting people's lives. So what do I say? I'm going to give you 2 stories. How many of you have heard of Zappos? Great. How many of you have heard of Microsoft? And the country manager's in here, right? Where's the country manager for Microsoft? I think he's speaking later on today. But anyway, so I'll tell you about the Zappos story. Zappos was the first online shoe retailer in the US. It was started by a guy named Tony Hsieh. And he had already been a serial entrepreneur before he purchased and started Zappos. His foray into the business was, we're not going to spend any money on marketing. We're going to spend that money on creating a positive, energetic culture in our organization. It's still going to be a call center. We're still going to process calls, but it's going to spend that money on his people inside of his company. And so all his advertising went to only empowering his agents and creating a positive culture. One of the great stories is one of his customer service individuals was talking to a group of people late at night who had been working on a project. This person was empowered. He hung up the phone. They had spoken about how hungry they were. They hung up the phone, and this person ordered pizza and sent it to their work office, okay? Because he was empowered to do that. That's creating a culture that supports your values, as Tito talked about earlier. But they already had the technology in place. So I want to be clear, it's about engaging with your customers. The second is Microsoft. Can anybody tell me the CEO of Microsoft? No, the CEO, not the country manager. Satya Nadella, right? So the story behind Satya is he was on the low list to become the CEO. Obama was on his way out. Traditionally, companies want to hire somebody from outside and bring him in. But the board chose Nadella. And why did they choose Nadella? They chose him because he had the power of empathy that he used to create a powerful cloud division within Microsoft. At the time, Microsoft had lost its soul. You had fiefdoms not working together. When the board looked at Nadella, they looked at one powerful story. And that story was when he first, around the time he joined Microsoft, he and his wife had a child. The child had autism. And for the first 3 years, Nadella was saying to himself, why did it happen to me? Why did I have a child that had autism? But through that three-year journey, his wife left her career and supported that child in a fantastic way, like all mothers would do. And through that experience, he learned, finally came to realization, it's not about him, it's about the child. And he grew to be a very empathetic leader. And he transformed that into growing one of the world's best cloud solutions within Microsoft. And it was because of that that the board wanted Microsoft to get its soul back, and so they hired him to do that. So what, Keith? The guy is empathetic. Does that have any relevance to the business? Remember, this is a technology company. We're talking about financial technology, but the scope of technology is critical. Within 3 years of taking the helm of Microsoft, he doubled the stock price, and the value of the company went up $250 billion within 3 years. And the customer, the internal employee satisfaction reached its highest level ever. So I'm telling you the lessons of the past so that as we go forward with financial technology, we realize that technology is critical but not sufficient to getting the adoption rate out to wherever we want to go. Does that make sense? Okay. The winners will be those who engage their customers. So I want to give you kind of a roadmap to how to engage your customers if you're a FinTech company. If you're not a FinTech company and you want to experience great customer satisfaction, I want to share with you a few ways to get there. The research is very clear. There's a lot of numbers up here. I'm just going to point you to one, 6x. It takes 6 times more money to acquire a customer than it does to keep an existing customer. This research is clear. It's been done over and over and over. So I want to empower you to understand you've got to focus on your customers. The next is, so how do we do that? I want to propose to you, there are many different ways, but I want to propose to you one tool is a process map of your customer's experience. This happens to be for a lending company. I'm in lending, makes sense, right? But you can apply this to any company you want. At the bottom is the number of interactions. At the far left is the satisfaction rate. So if I go to the far left, I see high. I go all the way up, I see excellent. One of the pieces is being able to apply online with an application and get a response in less than 24 hours, right? Very important to customers. My message around this process map is, if you haven't done this for your customer base, you're missing the step. You're missing a step in the way you approach your customers. When I started out in the contact center field long, long ago, the first thing we always focused on was CSAT. CSAT was a measure of how do customers feel about me. Over time, we realized how someone felt about you didn't necessarily turn into dollars, and we are in business, right? So the next step was Net Promoter Score. How many people have heard of Net Promoter Score? Right? So that asked the question, would you refer me to somebody else? Okay, now we're getting pretty powerful. And the next one came out over 10 years ago called the Customer Effort Score. How many people have heard of the Customer Effort Score? Oh, okay, so I'm sharing a little bit of information today, right? Customer Effort Score says, how difficult is it to do business with you? And what we found out through this study is that if it's easy to do business with you, which technology enables, if it's easy to do business with you, there's a higher likely rate of me staying with you and buying more. So it's not that these are exclusive. You can use them in conjunction, but you need to understand them and you need to be measuring them. At the end of the day, on the right-hand side, if you're doing this right, you're going to grow your revenue more than your benchmark. But what I would also say is there's something called unarticulated needs, right? So we did customer mapping, we're measuring the customer experience, but there's something called unarticulated needs. Customers don't know what they want. I'll give you two quick examples. When Ford was building his first car, imagine him going out to people then and saying, hey, what do you want for faster transportation? Now remember, at that time, what was the major mode of transportation? A horse. So what people said was, I want a bigger horse, I want a faster horse, I want a horse that doesn't eat that much, because it's expensive, right? They didn't say, I want an automobile with 4 wheels and a diesel engine that will take me from one place to another. Okay, Keith, that's such an old adage. Nobody would even, that's too much. That has no relevance to today. Okay, let's go back to Facebook. Before Facebook came out, if you said to a person, how do you want to communicate? What did they say? Let me have a phone, a cell phone, can we get the rates down cheaper, etc., right? They didn't say, I want an internet, social media, where I can talk to anybody real time and show pictures. But if you did the right customer understanding, you could discover what I call unarticulated needs. Our CEO likes to say that quite frequently. Okay, why we exist. At the end of the day, this is all nice. I go back to the original video. It's about what we call real stories, real solutions. And we have this in 3 categories. So our theme is always hope, dignity, and love. We are 100% online lender. We have algorithms for credit scores. You sign the contracts remotely. We distribute the money electronically to your bank account. So don't get me wrong. I've got to have that type of platform to do business, but that's not the game I'm in. The game I'm in is creating real stories and real solutions for our partners. Real quick, these 3 stories and then I'll wrap up. First one is hope. Here's somebody who's working in Manila. Her grandma is in a province that's stricken by a storm. She sends money to her grandma. How many of you send money to people somewhere else in the Philippines? Raise your hand. Right? This is about hope. The other is rescuing people that are going to 5-6s, that are having to pay 30% a month, right? Having to travel to the 5-6 that takes 20 minutes and having to do that twice a month. What kind of dignity do you lose when you work 2 weeks and then you have to go through this because you've lent money? So we talk about dignity. We want technology that enables us to do this effortlessly and forget all about these types of trials and tribulations. And then love. Every mother, parent at sometimes needs a helping hand. And especially when many HMOs have limitations, having a helping hand available is what we're about. Real stories, real solutions. As I end, Maya Angelou is a great African-American poet. And what she says is, it's not what you say, it's not what you do, but in the end, it's how you make people feel. So my call to action to all of you, as you grow up your industry or your tech industry, it's about how do you make your customers feel. Technology is definitely necessary, but not sufficient. Thank you for your time today.